Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about a very concerning storm bringing a high fire risk as well as a wall of 70 plus mile per hour winds and the possibility of strong tornadoes. Good morning everyone, this is your March 29th update. We got a lot to talk about in this update in the days ahead because we're talking about 3 days in a row of severe weather and a very concerning upgrade moderate risk going in for tomorrow on Wednesday. So the culprit of all that is this low level jet. It's going to be racing across from the west that brought all the much needed rain into portions of California and to portions of the desert Southwest. But as we get into the late afternoon and evening hour, that's going to be hitting in the dry line. But out ahead of it, we've got some very dry conditions to be concerned about, and we've got numerous red flag warnings in place for portions of Kansas getting into Oklahoma as well as Texas, and all these wind advisories as well out ahead of this strong low-level jet and a very concerning high wind warning up here in the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma, where they're going to be under a high fire danger today. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has elevated this risk to a critical level. All portions in the Texas Panhandle, into portions of Gooman, as well as into Dodge City, you're going to be on high alert because these conditions are prime for rapid fire initiation and widespread with humidity values anywhere in the teens of 12 to 18%. These conditions are bone dry and especially worrisome with wind gusts approaching 65 to 75 miles an hour. So any wildfire that's able to ignite in this type of atmosphere will rapidly spread quickly. So this is a very dangerous setup out ahead of this main line that's going to be happening before the severe weather threat today. Because all this is going to take place around 10, 11 o'clock tonight. You can actually see the dew points about that time frame. We're well into the 60s out here in Kansas, into Oklahoma, and much of north and central Texas. But you can almost see the explosion of supercell thunderstorms as we get into your 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock time frame, well out here out west and along the dry line. And I think that's the initiation point of these storms. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has kept the slight risk for severe weather for several days now, and that same risk extends all the way into portions of central Texas and North Texas, much of Oklahoma, all the way up into Kansas and extending into Iowa, with a mainly damaging wind threat as well as an isolated hail threat. And then you can't roll out a couple of tornadoes along the squall line. And this is the greatest initiation. I do feel when storms initiate 10, 11 o'clock tonight out here in West Texas, they will be their strongest. That's when I think they can produce the 70 mile per hour wind gust, have some isolated tornadoes along that squall line with a brief spin up as these rapidly accelerate from the west to the east and racing across into western parts of West Texas, western parts of the DFW area, and then eventually swinging through Oklahoma and North Texas, getting into East Texas. In fact, let's highlight around 10 o'clock this evening, we should have that dry line start to explode out here towards the Abilene area, getting into portions of Oklahoma as well as Kansas. And I think the first initiation, I do feel we're going to be looking at some isolated larger hailstones, could be on that quarter size or potentially a little bit higher variety. I think that's where there's going to be like a couple hour window. I think the most significant threat could be your hail, and then have your damaging wind of that 70 mile per hour wind gust, and then your isolated tornadoes spin up along that leading edge of that boundary, that massive squall line that's going to be forming into the overnight hours. As we push into central Oklahoma and North Texas, I do feel there's going to be a weak cap over this area that's going to be inhibiting the storm development a little bit and becoming less severe. They could be downgrading from the 70 mile per hour wind gust to the 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gust. The wind gust is going to be your main threat And then likely you'll have more areas that include the pocket change hail versus the quarter size hail, but you definitely can't roll out an isolated spin up into the overnight hours, because this is going to be racing across central Texas, into North Texas, into central Oklahoma, into Kansas for about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, in the wee hours of the morning. But as this moves through and gets into East Texas and portions of Arkansas, as we get into the more of the afternoon hours on Wednesday, I think this was when they rapidly intensify with this low-level jet now turning negatively tilted, and that's going to bring strong updrafts into the higher levels. And at the same time, we've got a ton of shear at the lower levels, and the atmosphere is going to be rotating big time as it takes advantage of a little bit more daytime heating. And you have that low-level jet, the low-level jet and those shear happening right around the same time. That's when I think they start to join together, and rapid explosion of supercell thunderstorms over portions of Louisiana and Arkansas, getting into Mississippi, western Tennessee, western Kentucky, and southern parts of Illinois. And in fact, the Storm Prediction Center has already upgraded and expanded and increased it to a moderate risk from yesterday, and then expanded the enhanced risk as well. So we're talking areas in Alexandria, Baton Rouge, into Monroe, going into Jackson, into Hattiesburg, all the way to Tupelo, into Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You're going to be under the gun to seeing that wall of winds, of widespread damaging wind gusts of upwards to 70+ miles an hour along this leading edge, and some isolated hail along that as well, but also the severe and possibly strong tornadoes of that EF2 type variety. And some of these have indications where they could be on the ground for an extended period of time. So you have definitely a dangerous setup setting up over portions of southern Louisiana into southern portions of Mississippi here, extending all the way up into southern portions of Illinois and western portions of Kentucky, as well as Tennessee. This whole bullseye is going to be under the gun for seeing that rapid initiation and the strongest tornado possibilities as we get into the afternoon hour. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted that hatched risk for strong tornadoes, and typically that's an indication of seeing some of those EF2 type variety type tornadoes, about a 10% chance within these isolated areas. So conditions are going to be prime into portions of New Orleans, getting into Birmingham, into Baton Rouge, as well as into Montgomery, into Mobile, Alabama. Those areas are primed to be seeing some of those stronger tornadoes, unfortunately, as we get into the afternoon. So a regional outbreak. This is pretty intense wording from the Storm Prediction Center. A regional outbreak of severe thunderstorms is expected on Wednesday across the lower Mississippi Valley in southern states. All severe modes are possible, including significant wind gusts of 75 miles an hour or stronger, on top of the strong potential of an EF2 type tornado, or even a little bit higher than that. So that is definitely concerning warning from the Storm Prediction Center as we get into the peak heating of the afternoon. Main time frame as we get into this area is going to be right in the late morning hours, but really intensifying through the 2 to 6 o'clock time frame. So you definitely need to be on a high alert in these areas. And I'll be on live here as well throughout the entire event from this particular setup to get keep you as safe as possible. And right now, you need to have your storm plan in place and know where to go if a tornado comes your way. And you need to be on your lowest level of the house, surrounded by all walls as possible, particularly maybe a closet, most interior room in the house. And so hunker down and bring a helmet in this type of situation as well. And let's have a place and play is when a tornado happens in your area, so you know where to go to be out of harm's way until the warning moves past. But as we get into that noon time frame, you can definitely see the rapid explosion off the low-level jet as we get into Louisiana, into Arkansas, into Missouri, heading into Illinois. And this nasty squall line, that's the wall of winds that is going to be racing across 50, 60 miles an hour. And that's going to bring some significant wind, straight line wind damage of, you know, upwards to 70 plus miles an hour. And were these actually isolated areas that particularly kind of bow out? If there's any indication, it's at times where they're able to bow out and have bow segments, that could be even stronger wind gusts, so those 80, 90 mile per hour type varieties. So it's a significant event as this moves across into the peak heating of the day. And you can see where it's at about 9 o'clock tonight time frame, or into Wednesday time frame, March the 30th, where that nasty squall line will be racing across into Mobile, getting into Birmingham by then, into central portions of Tennessee, central Kentucky, into portions of Indiana by then, with this nasty squall line over hundreds of miles will be racing across with that wall of wind of 70 plus miles an hour. And you still have some of those tornadoes, even possibility of strong tornadoes as this continues to push off into the east. So it's going to be pretty bumpy for about 10-12 hour window going on into the day on Wednesday. But as those storms continue to race across off into the East Coast, even we do have a slight risk for severe weather, mainly a wind threat as this gets into the Florida Panhandle, into portions of Tallahassee, going all the way up into Atlanta, Georgia. And then we also have another kind of bullseye section of portions of all the way up into New York, potentially, into Philly, and to get into DC, all the way extending into the Carolinas, into Virginia Beach areas. Those areas could be under the gun to seeing some of those higher wind gusts and some of those maybe larger hailstones by then as we move through that Thursday time frame. But look at the winds. I mean, we've got numerous wind advisories in place and high wind warnings in portions of the Texas Panhandle. There's going to be a significant amount of wind for the next couple of days through the midsection of the country, extending through the Ohio Valley, where a lot of those severe storms are going to be as this massive wall races across. So you could be seeing wide areas of 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts is definitely not out of the question, and some isolated reports of upwards to possibly 80, even some potentially upwards to 80 plus mile per hour wind gust. And as this continues to race across, I think by the time we get into your April 1st time frame in the morning, that will be extending all the way up into portions of New England by then, with this strong low level low of a 994 millibar low pressure. And we'll try to wring out some snow on the backside into portions of the Ohio Valley, getting into Virginia, as well as into Pennsylvania and upstate New York. And a lot of this will be some lake enhanced induced snow showers as well. So you definitely can't rule this out as this continues to try to push it off. We could finally say goodbye from this system, but that's not going to be until we get to late Friday afternoon into Friday evening. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely, I'll be going on live tomorrow, probably starting by late morning. I plan on being on for the entire duration of the event. So this is going to be, you know, probably a 10 to 12 hour window tomorrow where things could get really bumpy. So you need to stay tuned and keep weather aware and have a place where you can get all warnings to get out of harm's way as soon as possible. So I appreciate you guys watching. Definitely hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, and catch me on tomorrow's video where I protect you before and after the storm.